Chase at the 40. Look at that move. Look at Chase go. Oh, my goodness. What a gear.
He comes down to this in his car end zone. Intercepted.
McPherson. And Cincinnati is heading to the Super Bowl.
Toss here. Nixon's going to throw. Open man. Caught. Higgins. Touchdown.
Drives. Touchdown. Joe Burrow has his first rushing touchdown of the season.
Hooday, Bengal fans. He is Mon. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse, the heartbeat of our Cincinnati Bengals. Mon, we got a great show lined up today. A very, very special guest. But before we bring him on, Mon, how's your week been going?
It's been great. I just moving along. It's hot in Florida. It's almost 100 degrees down here today. I went on a big, long bike ride, my first one in 4 months. Elbow's getting better. I feel healthier. Good to go. It's really hot down here. I don't know how hot it is up in Kentucky and Cincinnati, but it's smoking hot in Florida.
It's rainy today, but it's been really nice. I just came back up here from Florida. It was 104 degrees the other day in Florida. I told my wife, I'm like, God, I'm so glad we're making this move. I am so tired of that heat. But you know what the heat can't stop, Mon? It can't stop that incredible mustache. That stash is back. That thing looks absolutely incredible.
Why do you think the Cincinnati Reds are so hot right now? It's the mustache. It gave the Bengals power. That 10-game win streak started with the mustache. The Reds are hot, and our guest is hot also. Let's talk about our guest.
All right, let's talk about our guest. We are very excited to have on today. You guys know him. He is the host of Strictly Stripes, the Bengals podcast, Strictly Stripes. You also know him for covering our Cincinnati Bengals for the Cleveland Plains Dealer. Our guest today is a guy that is he is completely involved with our Cincinnati Bengals, and we are going to talk a lot of Bengals football with him. So without further ado, let's bring on Mohammed Ahmad. Come on, Mohammed Ahmad.
Hey,
what's
Mohammed,
going
how are
on?
you? Hey, guy, how are you doing, buddy?
What's up? Appreciate y'all having me on, man. Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah, happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth, and thank you for coming on, Mohammed. We're very excited to have you and talk a little Bengals today. Again, man, we just really appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you guys having me on even more, man. I don't do many guest appearances. It's usually the other way around. I'm usually the one getting the guests. I get people from all over the beat and, all over the NFL teams or people that cover other teams, So I totally get it, man, but I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We love having you on. I love your podcast. It's great. Listen, before we start talking about the Bengals, let me ask you a couple questions. Tell us about your background. What drove you to sports journalism, and how did you become a beat writer for the covering the Bengals for the Cleveland Plains Dealer?
Oh man, that's a great question. Oh, by the way, I think it's Plain Dealer.
Plain Dealer. Okay. Did I
Yeah.
Plain Dealer? Thank you.
You might have said Plains. I don't know, but if you did, it's Plain Dealer.
Okay.
But yeah, just so my bosses don't get mad at me, got to make sure I represent the company right.
Yeah.
So your question about my background. So I want to say, gosh, I got to go way back for this. I want to say when I was like a junior in high school in Kentucky, where I'm from, Lexington, Kentucky originally. I was in high school, and I always liked sports. And, I always heard people say, do what you love, do what you love. And I was like, well, I love sports, but I know I'm not going to be a pro athlete because I'm not good at sports. So how can I, get involved in this thing and still kind of be around what I like? So I did a lot of like sports marketing classes. I was really into like business stuff, like marketing stuff. I was pretty good at it too. I did a lot of like marketing competitions with my school clubs, like FBLA and all that. But I just didn't really want to be kind of like at a desk, like behind the scenes. Like I wanted to really be a part of the action. So I did this summer program called Governor's Scholars that showed me how journalism works, especially like on the sports side. And I always thought, I didn't know much about journalism, but the more I looked into it, I was like, I could see myself doing this. And being on TV, I thought was something that was always cool. Just seeing people like go on TV talking about sports. So I figured, okay, I'll do broadcast journalism in college. So did that at UK, University of Kentucky. So I was in my hometown. Went there, did that, did a bunch of internships, got a lot of great experience. So then my first job out of college was, this is actually crazy. People don't believe me when I say this, but my first job was in Missoula, Montana. So we're talking
Oh
big sky
wow!
country. Yeah.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Oh yeah. Because the way local TV works is, you got to get your star anywhere and everywhere because you only have like 200 markets from like New York City to Juneau, Alaska. So whether you got to move to like the plains of Kansas or Idaho or South Dakota or small country town in like Mississippi, like you got to start somewhere. So for me, I mean, it was hard enough getting into TV because, like I said, there's only so many markets. Sports jobs are a lot more competitive on top of all of that. So I knew it was going to be an uphill battle just because I came from not a big name school like Syracuse or Northwestern, for example. So I knew that right there was going to make it a little bit more difficult. But, I didn't make any excuses. I still put my stuff out there. So was in Montana for a year, covered the Grizzlies and the Bobcats in Missoula. Bobcats were in Bozeman, covered them a little bit. And did high school sports. And then, I got really homesick. So after a year, I saw what else was out there. So there was an opening in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which it's about 2 hours from where I grew up. So geographically, it's like an hour north of Nashville, Tennessee. So I was there for a year, covered the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, a lot of high school sports because it's a big deal down there. And then I want to say after 2.5 years, I just didn't think local TV was for me. I got really burned out. I really enjoyed the work. It was fun, but it was just a lot. It was very stressful. And I knew that even if I climbed higher, like to say Lexington, my hometown, which that was always my goal, or maybe, even Louisville, which was nearby, or, doing TV in Cincinnati, I knew it wouldn't be much more of a payoff than what I was already getting. And it was just, the cost benefit analysis didn't really result in what I was looking for. So I said I should probably do something else. But I still wanted to stay in sports because, like I said, that was always just kind of my true love. So I saw Plain Dealer wanted to start covering the Bengals because, this beat that they have is pretty new. So I saw an application and, I actually wrote a little bit in college covering Kentucky Wildcats football and basketball. I was one of the editors on our school paper my senior year. So I said, hey, I have some writing experience, maybe I can use that to my advantage. So I applied for the job and just happened to, I don't want to say it was a perfect match, but honestly, I think it was. I just, some things just kind of work out. So after a year in Bowling Green, I got that job, started last September. So probably 3 weeks into the season. So I unfortunately didn't get to do training camp or preseason. So I was kind of playing catch up while like doing my job at the same time. But yeah, I've been here for about 9 months now. So it's been good. Looking forward to enjoying the next 5 weeks and then jumping right into training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's interesting that the Plain Dealer covers the Bengals. You don't see that. You don't see that type of thing very often when not only a rival area, but another area, even in a state, covers the other professional team. Again, not only that, but a rival. And again, I understand the close proximity, but very interesting to me how that all works out. How's it going? I mean, is it going well?
It's doing very well. I work with a great team. I work with two other guys named Andrew Gillis and Mike Neislick. So if you've heard the podcast, those are the other two yahoos, as I call them, who are working with me. I mean, they're both great. Andrew's really awesome. I think he was in Washington before this, covering I think the Ravens and the Capitals and a little bit of Orioles. He'd be a better person to ask about that. And then Mike Neislick, I mean, you look at this guy's resume. He covered Virginia Tech before this. He covered Auburn. I think he covered a couple schools in Michigan. So, I mean, you want a guy with like real beat experience. Like that's your guy right there. So like, those guys do a lot of the day-to-day beat stuff, like, quick hits from Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, like the big picture stuff, or I guess the day-to-day stuff. Whereas for me, I kind of do more like the in-depth stuff, a lot of the analysis, a lot of opinion. And it's not to say they don't do that either, but I kind of focus more on that than the day-to-day stuff. So I guess that's sort of how we delegate it between the three of us. But yeah, I mean, Cleveland.com is an awesome place, man. They do things differently because, like you said, I mean, you don't see that very often where, you have like the Browns and the Bengals on the same website. But, it's just part of the outside of the box thinking that I feel like makes that place really stick out. And that's a big thing that I think really attracted me to them as well, because, with local TV, I just didn't really get that being in a small market. So, covering an NFL team for a big website like that, it just worked out for me. So it's been great.
That's great, Mohammed. I'm really looking forward to your pod that's coming out. I listened the other day. You guys are coming out with the top 25 Bengals, the ranking.
Yes, we are.
That's going to be. I can't wait to listen to that. So really look forward to it.
Yeah, we love the idea. We might have to take that. We have to steal that idea from you, if you don't mind.
We'll give you all the credit.
We'll give you all the credit. But
I appreciate it.
Let's get into Bengals football, Mohammed, because obviously OTAs just wrapped up, and they're running around in shorts and t-shirts. But what are some major takeaways maybe that you got from that? Again, like I said, I know that we got a lot of guys not participating with injury and other things, but what are some of the big takeaways that you saw from OTAs?
I think there's quite a few. I mean, people are saying, oh, they're in shorts and all that, not much going on. And that's true. I mean, compared to a lot of teams, like especially around the league, they probably had a lighter offseason, especially when it came to like OTAs and stuff like you all mentioned. But the thing that stood out to me, I guess one of the things that stood out to me, and you guys are going to laugh, but like, I just think the thing that stood out to me is like, my God, Brad Robbins has a leg. Like, I know
that's the talk. That's the talk for sure.
Yeah. I mean, look, it is going to be a competition with Drew Chrisman. I mean, competition's competition. You guys know Darren Simmons, but I mean, from what I saw, the hang time, the distance, like that's exactly what they were looking for. And this is not to say Drew Chrisman doesn't have a shot, and this is not a knock on him either, because I think, for what it was worth, he did the best he could last year when Kevin Huber got benched. But, you don't just draft a guy in the 6th round thinking, oh, maybe he'll make the team. Like, I think they knew exactly what they were doing when they drafted him.
Absolutely.
And I think speaking of which, since we're talking about special teams, I mean, if you're Darren Simmons, you got to be excited about Charlie Jones. I mean, with respect to Trent Taylor as well, I think that punt returner job is calling Charlie Jones' name. You just see the way he cuts in his routes, the way he, takes advantage of the blocking, because they had like a little bit of blocking that was non-contact, obviously, at least during the mandatory minicamp part. But the way he can see downfield, the way he can, cut routes, it's very impressive to me. And I could see why he was the Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Year in his last year at Iowa in, I believe it was 2021, before he went to Purdue. So, I think the special teams stuff is pretty set. I mean, Cal Adamitis is obviously the long snapper. Evan McPherson's not going anywhere. Beyond that, I think offensively, they have the best depth they've had in a while, like on all sides of the ball, on the offense at least, like the offensive line, wide receiver, tight end. Like, this is a deep team. I mean, Orlando Brown already looks like he's been in Cincinnati for like 2 years, if not longer, just the way he's communicating. You have all that depth on the right, and they have all that, and they have all that depth on the right side, which I would say it's a 60% chance that the job is Jonah Williams's, but you still have Cody Ford. Jackson Carman's going to compete on the right side. Hakeem Adeniji is still going to be on that right side. And maybe, if they shuffle around, they put him back at right guard where they had him the year that they were in the Super Bowl. And then Lyle Collins, depending on his health, I would think he starts on the PUP list, to start the year. I don't know that he'll be ready for training camp, but once he's healthy, that's your swing tackle right there. So you have an even bigger, stronger swing tackle. Nothing against Adeniji, obviously, but it's just different where you can use Adeniji somewhere else. Maybe Cody Ford has his own little forte somewhere on the line. So the offensive line, pending any injuries, knocking on wood, I guess, is looking really good. And I honestly think Irv Smith, I know we haven't really seen much of him other than like a couple catches, including, I want to say, a really nice touchdown that was the last day of OTA, his little corner tutty. I think he's going to be good. Is he Hayden Hurst good? I think that's too early to say. We won't actually know until training camp, maybe not even until the preseason. But, I mean, based on what I've seen from him, based on what Joe Burrow has said, I think this is a guy who's going to fit into that offense, probably get paid just like Hurst and CJ Uzama did, because that's what happens when, Joe Burrow throws you the ball. But
that's exactly right.
But, yeah, he looks good. And then I guess really, I'm trying to find a way to put this. I think, defensively, there's all that concern about, what's going to happen now that Jesse Bates and Von Bell and Eli Apple are gone. Is it going to be exactly what you got from them last year? Probably not, because, I mean, it took Bell and Bates 3 years to get to the level they were at before they left Cincinnati. But I mean, Jordan Battle he's been getting some really good first team reps. You see how he communicates, how Lou Anarumo coaches him up, almost like Nick Saban did at Alabama, which I think is why they drafted him too, because of that. DJ Ivey had a pick 6. Sidney Jones, another guy they signed for depth, had a pick. Now, I'm not saying you're going to see Sidney Jones and DJ Ivey play any reps anytime soon, but you need that depth because you lost Joey Awuzie last year, and that's where you have to put in Cam Taylor-Britt. And now that Eli Apple is gone, let's say, God forbid, Cam Taylor-Britt gets hurt. Then, you're going to need a DJ Turner who also looked good, or a Sidney Jones, or a DJ Ivey. Like, you're going to need those numbers that you didn't have to the level that you have now last year. So they're going to be good, I think, in the backfield. They'll be good enough. How good, again, I think all of that's too early, but I like Nick Scott. I like what he brings. And I think, really, if they just let Dax Hill be Dax Hill to where, Jordan Battle and Nick Scott take a lot of the weight off his shoulders, I really think Dax Hill could be one of the best safeties in the AFC. Maybe not right away, but he'll definitely get there. So I know that was a lot, but I think those are the big things that definitely stood out to me.
Well, I think special teams, again, being a football coach myself, that I always put a huge emphasis on special teams. It can win and lose you games, and I think the Bengals saw that this past season. The Pittsburgh game, special teams cost us. Even the AFC Championship, Drew Chrisman out kicking the coverage on a flat punt. Those kind of things. They can cost you football games. I think the Bengals went out and that was a focal point, was to get more explosive on returns and to get more explosive in the punt game. And I think that's where we see the Brad Robbins thing. I know people kind of overlook the punting thing, but it's huge. It's huge when you have a guy that can put hang time on it and has a leg. I think he is the punter going into training camp. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Absolutely. You like you just mentioned earlier, when you use a draft pick to draft a punter or special teams player, he's going to make the roster, and I think he's definitely going to be the starter.
Yeah,
and we talked about Mon and I talked about that depth, in the secondary, in the backfield. That to me is going to be one of the most interesting battles going on in camp, because there is a lot of depth there. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of speed. There's a lot of versatility, a lot of guys that can play different positions. Some guys can play corner, nickel. Some guys can drop back, play safety. We got some in the box safeties as well. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that all pans out during camp.
Yeah. Mohammed, obviously, we just talked about a lot of the key players the Bengals drafted this year. They had a great offseason getting Orlando Brown, Nick Scott. Unfortunately for us Bengal fans, so did the Browns, Ravens, and Steelers. They had great offseasons, solid drafts. AFC North, you could make an argument it's the toughest division in football. How do you think the AFC North stacks up? Who do you think is going to give the Bengals the most fits for that division title?
I would definitely say, I had to think about this. That's actually a good question. We had a podcast on this a couple weeks ago. If anybody wants to go tune in and listen in, we did it with one of our other Cleveland.com writers, Jimmy Watkins. I don't know. I personally believe, I think it's going to be the Browns. I know people want to say the Ravens, and I think the Ravens is a safe pick too, but I want to say the Browns, man. I think people, and I'm not just saying this because I work for a Cleveland website. Like, I really think the Browns also had a good offseason. Like, I mean, God, they got so many guys. I mean, they got Elijah Moore in a trade. They got Zadarius Smith. They got Dalvin Tomlinson, Ogbo Okoronkwo. I think I said his name wrong, but edge rusher from Houston. I think that guy's actually slept on too. You get Juan Thornhill from Kansas City, who I think the Bengals should have gotten if they didn't get Nick Scott from the LA Rams. They got Juan Thornhill to replace John Johnson. I think they got Rodney McLeod as well, who won a Super Bowl with Jim Schwartz, who they also brought as their new defensive coordinator. Like, I don't know how good those guys are going to be. That's a big, what if? But I think that those are pretty good additions. Like Zadarius Smith, I'm a little biased Kentucky guy, but he was, I mean, he goes to Minnesota last year. Even while he's hurt, makes a Pro Bowl. I mean, underrated edge rusher. Juan Thornhill was a big part of that Chiefs championship defense. Dalvin Tomlinson, I think, was pretty good for what he was doing in Minnesota. Those are good additions. And then Elijah Moore, from what it looks like, he's already doing well in practice. And then here's the thing. I don't know that Deshaun Watson will go back to like the 2018-19 Deshaun Watson, who was like in MVP conversations, where he was maybe in that tier at the time with, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes before, Joe Burrow was drafted and before obviously Josh Allen came to the league, or once he came into the league. But he will be better. I mean, again, there's a lot of rust he had to shake off last year with this suspension, and I think he's just about shaking it off this offseason. You still have Nick Chubb, who's one of the best running backs in the game. You have, I think, the best offensive line in the AFC North. I think you could say one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. I mean, you look at the Pro Bowlers on that line. They got Bill Callahan, Brian Callahan's dad, as the offensive line coach. So, the Callahan rivalry is always going to be fun to watch twice a year. But they're built. They're a built team. They're shaking off a lot of rust. And I actually think they're going to knock on the door. And I think that week 1 game in Cleveland's going to say a lot about how good the Browns are.
Yeah, that's Jake knows I'm always pumping up the Browns every year. We get nice little debates over it. I think talent-wise, they've always had the talent. I think they just lack that maybe the intangible part. There's just other things that just, I don't think they mesh well. But you're right, that offensive line, they got Wyatt Teller, Bitonio, they're loaded. I agree. I personally think the Steelers scare me. They went out and got a lot of solid players. Of course, you got Watt, you got Fitzpatrick. I know their offense is still in the development phase, but they've signed so many great offensive linemen to try to build that steel curtain, offensive line, smash mouth football, Jerome Bettis days. I don't know, and of course the Ravens. It's a tough division. It's going to be really, really tough.
I think you have a lot of talent, right, with those other 3 teams. There's a lot of talent there, but again, like you said, Moss, the intangibles, and I think the Cleveland Browns, they just can't. They just can't ever put it together, right? It's the locker room, it's the leadership, it's in the intent. You can have all the talent in the world, but if there's no gel there, it just is not going to happen. I don't know. I think maybe it's the Ravens. Again, Mon, you and I talked about this on our show 2 weeks ago. I think maybe it's the Ravens because I think the Ravens do have the best defense in the AFC North and probably one of the best defenses in the NFL. So for me, I think that Ravens defense is tough. But I do think as good as this whole division is, I do think the Bengals I think they are still separated from the rest of the pack.
I'll agree.
Yeah. That Ravens defense is pretty good. I mean, Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, like you could say that's a top 5 linebacking duo in the NFL. Obviously, they traded Chuck Clark to the Jets, and I guess Marcus Peters. He's still unsigned, right? I think he's still
unsigned.
I think he's still unsigned. So see what they do there. But you also got Kyle Hamilton. I'm sorry, that was
Kyle Hamilton.
Kyle Hamilton,
Notre Dame, right?
Notre Dame, yeah, first-round pick from the year before. Yeah, I mean, hard-hitting safety who I think will make up for the loss of Clark. And then, I think, there's probably more to it than that, but that's what sticks out to me. I think that's right there enough to say that the Ravens have a pretty good defense next year. But it's a good division because I know I haven't mentioned the Steelers. Emphasis on yet. But hey, next year they're still in a little bit of a rebuild. I don't know if next year I would put them in the tier that we just put the Browns and Ravens in, but give them like 2 years. If Kenny Pickett is the real deal, if Najee Harris can keep pushing, if they still have T.J. Watt and Hayward and that defense, that classic Pittsburgh steel curtain defense with Minkah Fitzpatrick and Highsmith. Oh man, I think at that point I don't want to say it's a free for all, but it's definitely more competitive. It is the best division in football.
And I'll say this, Mohammed. Let me say this real quick. Mon has this thing about the Steelers. We own them now, but he just cannot let go. Those Marvin Lewis days of us never being able to beat that football team. I'm trying to explain to him, Mohammed. Those days are done. Those days are over. We own the Steelers now. We are not worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They won 6 of the last 7 last year. I think they're trending up. I was raised in Southern West Virginia, that's Steeler country, and I'm trying to get it off of me, but it's in me. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't root for them, but that's one team that they get the Bengals. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they always get the best of the Bengals. At least they used to. Let's put it that way.
Well, Mohammed, let me ask you something, because the probably the biggest storyline this offseason, besides signing Orlando Brown, it's got to be all of these contract talks going on in Cincinnati. Obviously, a lot of big names coming up. I kind of want to get a feel for you, somebody who covers this team, maybe where some of these contracts lie, maybe who you think we could see sign first. I think when you look at, obviously, Burrow, Higgins, and Wilson, those are the guys coming up pretty quickly here, and some guys that we probably will see getting signed here soon. But Jamar Chase, obviously, coming up next year. Then you have Cheeto, DJ Reader, Tyler Boyd. You have a lot of contracts coming up. So kind of give me a feel here on where you think some of these contract talks are right now with maybe Joe Burrow and Logan and T. And then I also want to know next year, some of those guys I just mentioned, DJ Reader, Cheeto, Tyler Boyd, do you see any of those guys possibly being in stripes for a longer period of time?
Still there, Mohammed? Hello.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're back. We're back.
So, yeah, I think my mic went out for a second. My apologies.
No worries.
So I guess I'll start with Cheeto and Tyler Boyd, since you just mentioned those two. I'll be totally honest. I could be wrong, but I don't think either of them are going to be back in Cincinnati after next year. I think this is it. I think the writing was on the wall with Charlie Jones and DJ Turner. I think this is just that version of, what the Bengals did with Dax Hill last year. That was a sign that Jesse Bates wasn't coming back. I think this is a sign that they are not going to keep Cheeto and Boyd past next year, because here's the thing with the Bengals. This is just how I guess it's always been, at least in the Duke Tobin, Mike Brown era. They just don't sign guys past their 30s unless, of course, you're Carlos Dunlap or Geno Atkins. Other than those two, I don't know that I see that continuing. Does it maybe continue with DJ Reader? I think there's a chance. I think you make an exception for him the same way, what I mentioned, like with Atkins and Dunlap. I think that could happen, because I think that's a guy that, like, you just cannot let him walk, because even at 28, 29, he'll be 30 next year. Even if you sign him for 2 more years, it's 2 years that are definitely worth it. But the thing with Cheeto is, he'll be 29 next year. And he's not on the good side of 30, because obviously he's coming off a torn ACL. Tyler Boyd, injuries have been catching up to him a little bit lately, like in the AFC Championship game, had a finger injury a few weeks before that, I think against Cleveland. So he's been banged up a little bit. Overall, he's been healthy, don't get me wrong, but you kind of start to see that. And, the question is, does the production match what they've seen the last couple of years? Because, unless you're Jerry Rice, like nowadays, once wide receivers get to their 30s, like you do start to see quite a drop-off. So if there's a drop-off there and they're just not feeling it, I don't know that you keep him. And on top of that, if Charlie Jones looks good beyond special teams, if you give him a few reps in the slot and he looks pretty good, I think at that point you just solved your problem. And it'll be tough. It'll be a hard decision, but I think you'd have to let Tyler Boyd and Cheeto walk.
Yeah, that would be crazy. That would be crazy. What do you think about maybe these ones that we know are coming up with Burrow, T, and Logan? What do you see happening, and do you see those happening quicker rather than later?
The $1 million question.
Yes, right? I know, right?
Yeah. I think with Burrow, it's not a matter of if, but when. The deal's going to get done. It's going to happen. I think when you hear guys like Jeremy Fowler and Ian Rappaport talk, a lot of the insiders who know more about that, it is definitely going to happen. I just wonder 2 things. Will it be after Justin Herbert gets a deal done with the Chargers? Will it be before that? Because what if we get the training camp and neither has a deal done? Do they still wait for Herbert to go first and then make Burrow the highest paid? Or do they just wait until training camp no matter what happens in LA with Herbert? I don't know. I don't know that side of it, as far as the negotiations and what they're looking for.
Right.
So it could be contingent on that. I don't know, because obviously we've already seen Jalen Hurts get paid, and then not long after that we saw Lamar Jackson get paid. So maybe that's part of the domino effect, And I think if you look at the trends of like when Josh Allen got his extension done, when Patrick Mahomes got his extension done, a couple years ago when they got paid, it was about July, August, like during that training camp preseason period. I would imagine it's around that time. And I would think that's what dictates a T. Higgins extension is like, okay, Burrow's done. What does the cap look like? And where can we work with it? This is what I think would happen if a deal is not done for Higgins. You let him play the last year of his deal. 2023 rolls around. It's going to go one of two ways. And this is just based on historical trends that we all know about. Either they get a deal done, he's in Cincinnati for a couple more years, however long, and then and of course, here's the thing: Jamar is also going to get done next year too. Like the same thing, like Burrow. It's not if, but when. So if you can get Jamar and T locked down next offseason, great. If not, here's what I think will happen with Higgins if he doesn't get a deal done. He gets tagged. And I think it's a repeat of what we saw with Jesse Bates last year. And I only say that because they have the same agent, David Mulugeta. So if Mulugeta gives him the same playbook that he gave Bates, you have another situation like that on your hands. How that plays out, I don't know. But you do risk that situation happening if Higgins is not extended now or at some point next year because, Chase is going to get paid. Burrow's going to get paid. To go back to Wilson, that's tricky. I don't know that you pay him now because I feel like, and again, I'm just speculating here. I don't know the ins and outs or what's going on. I'd imagine you're so focused on getting Burrow done and maybe thinking about Higgins now through later that I think Wilson, and this is not like a knock on him, I think you just kind of have to wait until the dust is settled and see where he fits. If you can give him a deal like Jermaine Pratt, congrats. You just kept like some of the biggest pieces of your overall core. If not, then same thing with Wilson. If he has an amazing year next year and he wants to test the waters out, you might have to let him do that. And at that point, it is what it is. Kind of like he did with Von Bell, with Hayden Hurst, with Samaje Perine. It may happen to Logan Wilson as well. So it's a domino effect. I think it depends on who gets done first and when it gets done and what that means for the other. But I look at it as start with Burrow, get to Higgins, and if we get to this point next year, deal with Chase and then see where Wilson fits.
I think as Bengal fans, we need to start getting ready to have a Jesse Bates type situation every year. I mean, a lot of people are upset that he left. The Bengals are building a great roster, and I think that we could have a player, caliber of Jesse Bates that we just can't keep because we have so many solid players that will want big contracts. It is going to be very interesting over these next 20 months to see how these contracts play out.
It will be indeed because, like you said, and this is with every good team, the Chiefs, the Bills, you can't keep them all. The Chiefs don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. Now, obviously, he was traded, but, I think even if he did out his contract, if he wasn't traded, you can't keep a guy like that. He was going to ask for a lot of money. The money he got in Miami, I don't know he could get that in Kansas City because they're already paying Patrick Mahomes. Granted, they spread the money out pretty well because of the way that deal was spread on the cap, but, they had to pay him. Juju left. Frank Clark left. They lost Juan Thornhill. They lost a lot of big names.
Orlando Brown, right?
Orlando, see what I mean? Orlando Brown came to the dark side, as Travis Kelce put it.
But I love it.
But look at how many they lost. It just happens. Yeah. The Bills, same thing. You see this whole Stephon Diggs situation. Who knows what's going to happen to him? I don't think he leaves, but the point is, guys come and go. They just got Damian Harris, who just left the Patriots, and they had a few moving parts around. I know they extended Ed Oliver. They still have Von Miller. They added Leonard Floyd, but how long do you keep those guys? How much longer can Von Miller be good? How much longer can Stephon Diggs work with Josh Allen if things really aren't as good as they seem? There's a window for everybody.
Yeah, right. Unless you're Joe Burrow. Then there's the window
it's your
always
whole career.
It's your whole career. I do agree with you about DJ Reader. I talk about that all the time on the show. I think DJ Reader is a guy who will be in stripes until he retires. I just think he is one of those guys that this Bengals front office wants in that locker room. Not to mention, he's probably one of the best nose tackles in football.
Yeah, I like the fact that he's already gotten a giant payday, and maybe if anybody on that list that we were talking about gives them any type of discount, maybe hometown discount, maybe it's him. But like I said, we'll see. Mohammed, we've made the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row. Obviously, we got elite players, some generational type players. I just don't think the intangibles are talked about enough when it comes to the Bengals. That solid locker room, that unifying culture they have in there. What makes that locker room so strong?
I think it's very simple. It's Joe Burrow. It's just Joe Burrow. I just think, one guy can literally change an entire culture just like that. Now, It's not only him, obviously, because he's got guys around him like Jamar and T and Logan Wilson and everyone else we mentioned, but he has just changed the culture of that locker room. And I did an entire story just on like his leadership skills and his leadership attributes. And if you guys want to read about it, just go to Google, look up Joe Burrow leadership, and it'll pop up. But there is just a certain form of like transformational leadership that he brings, emotional stability, interpersonal attractiveness that just makes him such a likable figure, where guys like Ted Karras and Lyle Collins and Alex Kappa and Orlando Brown and Hayden Hurst and Irv Smith all come to Cincinnati, not solely because of Burrow, but I would say primarily because of Burrow. Irv Smith knows he can get paid just like Hayden Hurst and Uzama. Ted Karras and Orlando Brown and other guys like that. No, they can come to a team and win championships because that's what the Bengals are good at. Like, they're a championship contender. They were just in the Super Bowl. They were just in the AFC Championship, as you guys mentioned. And those guys are looking, saying, hey, I want to be a part of that. Like, I want to go to the Super Bowl. I want to get a ring. I want to go to the AFC Championship. Orlando Brown just won a ring. He wants to get another one, and he knows he can do it in Cincinnati and still get paid. So it's just Joe Burrow, and I think it's just the way Zach Taylor kind of allows Burrow to be himself, the way the organization just puts a lot of trust in him, which is why he's going to be paid, and he's going to be paid a lot of money for, I would think, a pretty good amount of time. So, Darren Simmons told me this in an interview for a special story I'm working on. Like, he's been here 20 years. He was here through all of the Marvin eras with Carson Palmer, with Andy Dalton, and now Joe Burrow. Like, Darren Simmons said, without taking anything away from those eras or from Marvin Lewis, I mean, Joe Burrow has just changed the city. He has changed this culture. He has changed this franchise. So I just think it's that. It's Joe Burrow and how Zach Taylor and the team lets him be himself.
I love hearing that. I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, we talk about the Joe Burrow effect all the time. I mean, it is real, right? I mean, that what you're saying, I agree with 100%, Mohammed. That having a guy like that in your locker room can change everything. It can change the culture. It can change how you're perceived nationally, right? I mean, that's something that we have seen a huge change with national media that has always dogged on our Bengals. And now, even though still we're still getting a little bit of cutback here, a little bit from some of the other media outlets and some of the other, I call them clowns, but some of the other talking heads out there in the media that are professional athletes or were professional athletes and think they know what's going on with football. But we still see that perception of national media has changed. And I think that is more telling than anything, because the Bengals have never been looked on graciously by the national media.
It's tough. I mean, you hear the same storylines. Oh, cheap ownership. Oh, they're just dysfunctional. They're a mom and pop shop. I understand arguments on both sides of that. I understand, like, this is not the New York Giants or the New England Patriots. Like, I get it. It's Cincinnati. It's a small market. It doesn't pop out like Dallas or LA or New York. And obviously, the structure is different because they're one of the few teams that doesn't have a GM, unless you want to give that unofficial title to Duke Tobin for the job he's done. But again, is there luck involved? Is it just bad juju? I don't know. I'd have to really kind of dig deep for that, because, you obviously look at how it was before 1990, when they last won that playoff game. up until where we are today. And there's different things you could point at. I think it was just bad draft history. I just don't think they made the best draft choices in the 90s, whether it was Kajana Carter, Dan Wilkinson, Achilles Smith. I think in the 2000s, it was just bad luck with Carson Palmer's injuries and him getting unhappy because of it. And I think the media kind of feeding into that and saying, oh, look, he's unhappy. It's a crappy city. And then I think it goes from that to Andy Dalton, who actually made more playoff runs with Marvin Lewis. But then it was like, oh, they can't win a game. They can't win a game. So there was just always something, whether it was injuries, bad draft picks, playoff choking, whatever it was. Everything got in the way. But I think now that you have Zach Taylor, now that you have like Duke Tobin taking a big lead and you have Joe Burrow, I think whatever we mentioned, bad draft picks out the window. Look at their recent draft history. Winning the big game, they just made 2 AFC championships. That's out the window. And, just like injury luck, Joe Burrow tore his ACL, but look at where he is today. I mean, he bounced back better than ever, in a way that I think Carson Palmer kind of wished he bounced back. I just don't ever think he was ever the same after that ACL tear, at least not until he got to Arizona and had that one good year. But it was just a lot of different things. I think just constantly blame it on ownership and management. I think it's just playing a broken record over and over again. I don't know that you can keep using that argument after a while.
Yeah, and Mon and I,
it's a lazy take. It's a lazy take.
It's lazy. And Mon and I obviously are a little bit older than you, Mohammed, and Mon's a lot older. Mon's a lot older. I'm not, but Mon and I have been through.
I'm still an athlete. Look at me.
Better than ever.
Yeah, better than ever. Mon and I have been through, 4 decades of Bengals football, and there has been a lot of issues with the drafting. There's been some issues with the ownership. There's no doubt about it. But at this point now, this team, this organization has been well into the 21st century now, and I think that is a lazy take to keep going back on. The ownership, the mom and pop thing, and all this other stuff. There's no GM, all this other nonsense. This team is now a Super Bowl contender and will be, I think, for a long time. So I do agree with you. I think there's been a lot of things going on in the past with this team. But one thing is for sure, that the perception of this team and this organization has all changed when number 9 walked through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's a culture shift. It's transformational leadership. It's interpersonal attractiveness. It's something they hadn't had probably since the Boomer Esiason era, and we all know what happened back then. They made a Super Bowl. So,
yes, good point.
You want to talk about the good old days? I guess the good old days are back again.
Yeah.
Yes, Mon and I are very happy because we've been through a lot of bad old days. Let me ask you something real quick too. So we're talking about all of this winning in this championship and everything else that we have going on in Bengaldom right now. Obviously, coming off of the Super Bowl appearance and a couple minutes and a bad call away from winning a championship, being in the AFC Championship again last year. Give me one thing, Mohammed, this team has to do to get over the hump. What do you think is one thing they have to do to get over the hump and bring a championship to Cincinnati?
Just don't let Joe Burrow get beat up. I just think it's that simple. Don't let him get sacked. I mean, look at the one thing that kept them from winning the Super Bowl each of the last 2 years. Sacks. AFC Championship, 5 or 6 sacks. Super Bowl, 7 sacks, which tied a record with, I think it was Roger Staubach from the Cowboys. Like, don't let him get hit. And that's why they realize that. And they're like, okay, we're going to pay Orlando Brown a lot of money because we couldn't get it done in 21. Couldn't get it done in 22. And, of course, 22 you could say was bad luck because they didn't have Jonah Williams. They didn't have Alex Kappa. They didn't have Lyle Collins in the championship game because of injuries. But you could also say, where was that O-line continuity in week 1 when they lost a very winnable game to Pittsburgh, which could have given them the 1 seed, which could have made an impact in the playoffs. So, we can focus on that championship game, but that line also had some issues that you could say led to some other trickle effects, like that Steelers game and that loss to Dallas a week later, where they didn't have that complete preseason, and we saw them kind of pay the price with that 0-2 start. Do not let him get hit. I mean, I get Mahomes. He can get away with a lot of things with or without a good offensive line, and that's just a testament to Mahomes, and it's not a testament against Burrow, but no matter who Burrow is throwing to, he needs protection. He needs protection. And even if he moves like Mahomes in the way Mahomes does, Mahomes still had like 2 or 3 Pro Bowlers on that O-line. Just don't let Burrow get hit. And I think you could see the Bengals honestly be the best team in the NFL next season.
I agree, man. I think it's that easy. I really do think it's as easy as you say it is. I think this team has a roster that is the best roster they have had in these last 3 years. I think it's the most depth they've had, and I think it's the most talent they have. And I definitely think it's the best offensive line they have. And I think that's the key. I mean, this team, we would be hoisting 2 Super Bowl championships if we had just an average offensive line these last 2 years. I think that's what's so incredible about what Joe Burrow has accomplished. And I think that gets overlooked in all of these quarterback comparison talks is he has played behind a very poor offensive line these last couple of years. And I just think it's incredible what he's done. It's amazing.
The Super Bowl year, Jake, the Super Bowl year, arguably, I think it was a bottom 5 offensive line in football.
No doubt.
No, absolutely. Easily.
And he took the team to the Super Bowl. People could say luck. That Tennessee Titan divisional game, he was absolutely pummeled. Sacked 9 times, hit multiple other times, and they still won the game. He's tough as nails. He's special. And you're right, Jake. I agree with you on that. And Muhammad, you're right too. God, I sort of developed a headache when you were talking about all those sacks in the playoffs.
No, but Burrow feels.
It is that simple. It really is. I agree with you 100%. I think we protect him. I think this may be simplistic. I know there's a lot of variables, but I think if Alex Kappa played in that championship game, I think that could have made a difference. Just simple him.
Or Lyle Collins or Williams, at least one of those guys. Absolutely.
Exactly. That could have been an extra 2 first downs. It could have been an extra second for a touchdown.
Like that last drive, that 3rd and 8 where he got sacked by Chris Jones. I mean, that's a big difference.
Tyler Boyd's injury to me was the catastrophic injury of the game.
Oh, it absolutely was.
Yeah, because he played 2 catches for 40 yards. They were doubling the other guys, and he was going to have a huge game. But, okay, I really got a headache now. Okay, listen. My last question.
On you. Did you hear what Muhammad said? He said, now you know what Burrow feels like.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Listen, in closing, Muhammad, again, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. We got one last question for you. It's a simple one. We just want to know, give us your record, your prediction for this upcoming season for the Cincinnati Bengals, regular season prediction. What do you think they're going to be?
Regular season prediction. I believe the Cincinnati Bengals are going to go 14-3.
Nice.
Hey,
I really believe it.
I said 13-4. I said 13-4. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said the same thing, Muhammad. I think 14-3. And I'll tell you, I know I always come across as a homer on the show, but when you go through that schedule, the way that the schedule is set up, I think it's one of the best schedules the Bengals have had in a very long time as far as home away, where the teams fall, the strength of schedule, where the bye week is. I think this schedule works out almost as good as it could have been for the Bengals.
I think so too. I think that, it would have been cool if they had more primetime games at home because obviously they have to go to Jacksonville and Baltimore for those games. And obviously they got to go to Arrowhead for the which I think is going to be one of the best games of the year for the New Year's Eve game. But, I mean, a home game against Buffalo in prime time, the L.A. game, I feel like that's no offense to the Rams, but, I mean, they could be fighting for the number 1 overall pick next year. That's how bad I think they'll be. That's a really easy give-me primetime game. So, yeah, I think the balance, the bye week, and playing the 49ers after that, I think is really good. Yeah, overall, I think it's a good schedule for them.
I think all the tough teams. Go ahead, Mom.
No, I know Jake's going to disagree on this one. I think week 1 is going to be one of their hardest games. I mean,
I agree with you on that.
It's always unpredictable. You never know what happens week 1. Playing in Cleveland on the road, I think the Bengals can win it. Yeah, I'm not saying they're not, but that's going to be a tough game. We got to survive those first 2. Those divisional games are huge. But I picked them to be 13-4, and I think it's going to be a special season.
Yeah, week 1 is. I mean, we saw week 1 last year.
Yes,
we saw how that went. And honestly, even the year before against the Vikings, they barely pulled that game out in overtime. That was a close one too.
Yeah,
it was.
Well, Mohammed, before you get out of here, go ahead and let everybody know where they can watch you, where they can read you, where they can see you. let everybody know on the Bengals Pulse here where they can find Muhammad Ahmad.
They can find Muhammad Ahmad on Twitter at Muhammad Ahmad TV. So in spelling, if you don't see my name on the screen spelled, it's MOHAMMAD TV. And if you want to read my stuff, go to strictlystripes.com or cleveland.com/Bengals. Either link will take you to the stuff that I do, that my partners Mike and Andrew do as well. We've got our top 25 list, like we talked about, gradually trickling in before training camp, doing some prediction pieces, our podcast 5 days a week, even in the off season, because there is no off season for us. We're always chugging through like you guys. And
All right.
It's going to be good. It's going to be really good. So you can check me out on those sites.
Great. Muhammad, thank you again. We really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hope you come back on.
Oh, I will. And maybe we'll have you guys on too one day. You never know.
Absolutely. Let us know anytime.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
All right, Houday.
That was great. That was awesome.
Great.
Man, I tell you, a lot of good insight there, and I really appreciate him coming on.
And you know what's crazy is off air, him and I were talking. We found out we live in the same neighborhood. We're like, we're almost next door neighbors here in Kentucky. So we're definitely gonna have to get together and hang and watch some Bengals. So yes, very good stuff. And man, oh man, I hope. The only thing that makes me nervous is that contract talk. I just hope that the Bengals get some stuff done here coming up. I agree with them. I agree with Muhammad. I think there is going to be some kind of a trickle effect with the Joe Burrow signing, and I think that's kind of what they're waiting for. But I think we'd all feel a lot better if we started seeing some Bengals signing some contracts here soon.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, I hope this NFL salary cap keeps on expanding because it's going to need to. We talk about it on previous episodes, Jake, but with Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Wilson, let's say they all sign. Let's say there's no guarantee that Wilson will sign. That's going to be 50% of our salary cap. I mean, that's 5-6 players. We still got to sign 47 other guys. I know. It's going to be tough, and I mean, I'm on the record. I think the big three stay. I really do. I think they're that special. The Bengals are going to continue drafting cornerbacks, defensive linemen, these premium positions. They're going to be just a repetitive cycle of young guys coming in, and that's why I hope we keep Lou for a few more years, because I think he's going to potentially find a head coaching job. Hopefully, they're grooming somebody to take over, but it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. That was a great. I really enjoyed his insight. He gave us a lot of good info.
Absolutely. And let's real quick before we got here. I mean, let's shout out our Cincinnati Reds, baby, right? You and I were talking about it. We were talking about it before the show started. This team is so – oh, you got one. Nice.
Nice. That was my Father's Day present. I'm so happy.
Nice. Listen, this team, man, 8 in a row. That game yesterday against the Astros, I think it just goes to show exactly where this team is right now. This team is good. This is not luck. This team is good. And I'm telling you, Mom, being up here, the city is starting to get electric about Reds baseball. It's going to be a lot of fun, this stretch run. And guess who's starting tonight and batting sixth and playing first base? Joseph Votto, who has not played a game yet this year. You add Joseph Votto now to that lineup. Oh, man, it's just so much fun. It is so much fun. I feel like Reds baseball is back. The Bengals, I mean, you got two very young, dynamic teams in this city now, right? And not only that, but two of the best young, dynamic teams in their perspective sport. You know what I mean? In football, you have the Bengals, this young team, this up-and-coming team that's only going to be better, and you have the Reds now, who have these handful of rookies that are so good. I mean, the infield, I was at the game last week, and I'm looking at the infield, and you got Steer at first. You got India, the rookie of the year, at second. You got Ellie. I think McLean was playing short that game. Then you have Ellie at third. You have Tyler Stevenson at catcher. I mean, that's just the infield, man. This team is so much fun to watch. They're going to be so good, dude.
Yeah, it was great. I was leaving the movie theater yesterday on Father's Day, and I'm looking at my phone, and they had just tied at 5-5, and I looked at my wife and my daughter. I said, "Drive fast, got to get home now." And I got to watch the last 3 innings, and it was they are exciting. It's Cincinnati is a buzz right now with the soccer team, with the Reds, and of course the Bengals. Man, what a time to be a Cincinnati sports fan! And I can't wait for tonight's game because Joey Votto is one of my all-time favorite Red players.
I'm excited. I'm hoping this weather holds off so we can see some baseball tonight. And I think too. I just think the way these two organizations are feeding off of each other it's really a cool thing to see. Where you have again, all the hype that is now Bengals football and all the excitement that's built around that. I think the Reds saw that and realized, we got to compete with the Bengals now because this has always been a baseball city, but now it's becoming, one of the most electric organizational cities when it comes to professional sports. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It's a blast. I love it. I'm enjoying it, and I can't wait to see how this work. The rest of the season. Hopefully, they make a solid run and they win this division and they do something.
And
we'll see.
And your guy Trent Irwin is throwing out the first pitch this week. I think it's maybe Wednesday. I think it's a Wednesday game. Trent Irwin throwing out the first pitch. All right, Bengal fans, that's another edition of the Bengals Pulse. If you liked this podcast, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you check us out on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. Give us that 5-star review. Mon and I would very much appreciate that. As always, follow him on Twitter at TheFireMon and me on Twitter at Coach Jake Owens 9. And as always, follow us. The Bengals Pulse is on Twitter at Bengals_Pulse9. On Instagram, the same without the app, Bengals_Pulse9. Make sure you check out Mohammed's stuff. Once again, you can find him on Twitter at Mohammed Ahmad TV. Make sure you check out Strictly Stripes. We want to thank Mohammed again for coming on the show. And as always, make sure you check out all the awesome podcasts right here on the Wincinnati Podcast Network. He is Mon. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse. Hoo day, Bengal fans. We will see you next week. Go Reds.